Hi, my name is Tonia West, and this is Max Loves Midland.
Welcome back to the Max Loves Midland Show. I'm your weekly tour guide, Kevin LaDuke, and it's a very, very special episode. This is episode 20 of the Max Loves Midland Show. We're very excited to tell a really interesting story today. So a lot of times we're focusing on people that are making changes in the community, and Tonia, you definitely are, but I think what makes your story interesting is that you are a boomerang, meaning you came back to Midland, so you lived here at one point in time and decided this is home. So I'd like to introduce Tonia West.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here to tell my story.
That's awesome. Thank you for being here and telling your story. And I think it's just great for folks to be able to hear what can drive that effect. So you moved back here just a couple years ago, correct?
About a year and a half ago,
About a year and a half ago. But it's not the first time you lived here. So do you want to talk a little bit about that exploration of when was the first time you were here?
Sure. I am a military kid. My dad was a Marine, and he retired from active duty in 1994 and decided that Midland was a great place for us to settle down.
What I thought was interesting, too, is when we talked a little bit about you moving here in 1994, was that it was the proximity to Chicago, because you had family in the Chicago area, and this just became that place that you guys were kind of drawn to, and your parents are still here today, correct?
Yes. Well, my mom is currently out of the country.
Okay.
Avoiding the snow. But yes, both of my parents still live in Midland. I still have my older brother living here too, and a couple of other siblings that aren't too far away. But yeah, we decided on Midland because my dad is originally from the Chicago area. And so we would visit his family a lot for the holidays, and we just decided, why not make that drive a little bit shorter for us?
What was some of the driving factors of him wanting to settle here at that point in time?
Well, this is a new story that I've heard, actually. I didn't really know this until recently, but the decision came down to between Los Angeles and here. We were already living in California, in San Clemente, and so, the thought came down to, should we kind of stay in the area where we're familiar, or should we get closer to family? And so my dad scoped out Midland and loved it, thought it would be a great place for us to grow up, and he was right.
So that Midland that you were here in 1994, were you a freshman in high school? Is that what it was, or a little bit younger?
Well, I was a freshman in junior high.
Freshman and junior high. Okay,
Yeah,
when you said freshman the other day, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm trying to do the timeline here.
Yeah, I was, I think, the last of the ninth graders to go to Northeast. And so the next year, when I was a senior in high school, the ninth graders moved to Midland High. And so I was kind of part of that transition.
So compare that world you were dropped in 1994. What does that look like when you're dropped back here in 2023?
Very different. Very, very different. It was really exciting to come back and see how everything had changed, and just have that community feeling again. I didn't realize how much I missed it. But, just to see that the city is listening and giving the people what they want, it was very, very different.
And you said moving here to becoming that, that freshman, that last class there at Northeast, that there were some challenges kind of getting into this community and becoming a member of what you had going on here.
Yeah, it was definitely a big culture shock coming from California. And just the schools were different, the schools were smaller, everything was just so much more tight-knit, and I stood out like a sore thumb. I did.
Was it just like one of those things where you enter a room and it's like, oh, like the representation is not there, and that feeling, right?
Yeah, a little bit of that, and just my style was completely different. I glitter and rainbow clips, and that style hadn't quite come this way yet, and so it looked like I had just stepped out of a movie or something, I'm sure, to my classmates.
Well, it's like we're always a couple years behind here in the Midwest. I hope not as much anymore with the way that
No, I think we're catching up.
Social media and stuff travels. I used to work at Champs in Saginaw, and when I was working at Champs, you're selling sneakers, and people are coming in with fashion and trying to match up outfits, and I was like, I feel like I'm in like a music video from like 4 years ago at all the time.
Yes, that's how my brother and I felt when we first moved here. It was just, when is everyone going to see what we're wearing? And it took a few years.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So your journey through high school, you went to Midland High, correct?
I did.
What was that experience like?
I loved high school. It was a really cool experience for me. I had great friends. I had great teachers, very supportive teachers that really drove me to the things that how am I trying to say this? My career. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really where you fell in love with writing, correct?
Yes. I didn't realize that I had a talent for it. It was my ninth grade English teacher, Miss Rusk, who said,
Shout out Miss Rusk.
Miss Rusk. She says, I think that you have a pretty interesting talent. And she started entering me in poetry contests and things like that. And so I wouldn't have done that for myself. And through her, she kind of gently and lovingly pushed me into journalism, which is where I met another great supportive teacher, Miss Hutchinson.
Awesome. So you get into journalism, and that journey really took you to a bunch of different places.
It sure did. Yeah.
So after high school, where did you end up at?
Well, I applied for Western Michigan and Kalamazoo, but it didn't quite work out. And so I stayed around here, and I ended up going to Delta for a couple of years, where I wrote for the Delta Collegiate there.
Still around. The Delta Collegiate is
Yes.
still clicking. Their office. Have you been down there at all into where they're like what they have set up now?
I've been back a couple of times, but I haven't gone into the journalism office. I think they may have moved, maybe. But I'm still very, very good friends with my co-editor. I actually spoke to him yesterday, and we were talking about going back and kind of see what's changed.
You really should. So I went to the broadcasting program at Delta, and they had just an incredible broadcasting program for being, a small local community
did,
college.
yes.
And you want to talk about the resources. I mean, you've got PBS right in there, but then also just knowledgeable professors. And was so lucky to study underneath Kim Wells. She's won an Emmy. She used to work on news, different news channels, and just had a great career. But they have completely redone that lower floor there on the S Wing of
have
Delta
they?
College. I think it's the S Wing. I'm not sure.
I think it is the S.
But yeah, you walk in, you go down the stairs. So the Collegiate is down there right next to the broadcasting area.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
It is super awesome. And just that marriage of that, writing and multimedia and kind of how everything has switched in journalism now can take place in content as well. And it's just super awesome. So I definitely encourage you to head back because they're doing a lot of really good stuff here locally in that journalism space.
I love that they have a whole wing now. We used to kind of share a space with campus police.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so we were, causing trouble. They would always keep an eye on us.
Well, it's like even me 10 years ago, they had us in like an equipment closet, basically. Like you
Yeah.
want to get a camera, it's like you have to go in this closet. Now
Yeah.
it's like we're featuring the program. And that's really cool because for us, like broadcasting and film, there were some specific tax breaks in effect years ago. And that's when we had like Batman filming in Detroit and all these movies coming in, and Real Steel was filmed in the Thumb. And without those tax breaks anymore, it really kind of switched everything up. So then it became like, what does this career look like and where can we fit into? So it's just cool to see them continue investing in that art piece because people are interested in it.
Yeah, there's definitely a big need for it too. I will definitely go and check it out the next time I'm back.
For sure. So looking at journalism, I just think it's so awesome. You said that you moved out to Washington, D.C. at one point in time.
I did. That was my first foray out of Midland. And it was, I worked for a very big company, and it was something I'd always wanted to do. But in actually fulfilling that dream, I realized that maybe that world was a little too big for me. And immediately I started kind of longing to come back home. And so I moved to the D.C. area, but just started moving farther and farther north until finally I just left the state.
Well, and you met your husband in Washington, D.C., correct? And you guys
Yes.
have a daughter, and you guys are all here now as a family unit, but you guys had stops in Knoxville, Tennessee, correct? And like just kind of bounced around until was it surprising to you to say, I want to go back to Midland?
Yes, it was a huge shock. But the way that it happened was, we would come back and visit every holiday, and sometimes during the summer too. And then we started realizing it was just getting harder and harder to leave until one visit. I think it happened right after COVID. We were like, I think we need to move back. And even my husband was saying we need to move back, but he's never lived in Michigan before. But
He's an honorary Michigander now.
yeah, but I mean, as much as we visited and he loves it here, he says we have to move back.
So that's amazing. And
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of poetry in your story because there's similarities in the way that you moved here and kind of didn't feel that sense of belonging immediately. And the work that you're in now, you're really providing that sense of belonging for community in multiple
Yeah.
different ways. But then also that poetry of your dad kind of looking at Midland as that space to bring the family and choose this area. And then you, surprisingly, did the same thing. And
Yeah.
it's just, that's a beautiful mirror of how can we give that gift back. And I think that's just amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. When we first moved here, we didn't understand immediately why my dad would choose Midland for us. It was so different from what we had. We didn't have nearly as much going on around the community as we were used to in California, especially we lived on base. And we lived in family housing too, so everything was kind of centered and geared towards families. But after a few years, it was still kind of challenging to live here, but I started realizing, he wanted us to be safe, he wanted us to be happy, and he wanted us to have a true community, and we wouldn't have had that anywhere else. So good job, Dad.
Good job,
job.
Dad.
Yeah.
I think that's and I think that's the goal of what we're trying to do here, right? So we can talk about economic infrastructure all day, we can talk about physical infrastructure all day, but when we are trying to build that interpersonal infrastructure of a community, that's what brings people here and keeps people here. It's that idea of rooting for one another, and it's that idea of trying to create a home for everyone in a place where we can all coexist in the space. And we're not always going to agree, and that's just human nature. And we have to have disagreements even to move forward. But if we are willing to collaborate and understand that we are all trying to build the best place for everyone to thrive, that's the key. And that's what we need to keep moving towards. And I think it's really cool because you came back and you immediately started looking for ways to make that change in the community. You have history in graphic design, you have history in writing, and you have all these gifts that you can give in different ways. So you started looking to see how you could really plug in. So what were some of your first building blocks of coming back and reintegrating into this community?
Well, the first thing I did right before I moved back, I had obtained a 200-hour yoga teacher training certificate. And so I was teaching yoga in Knoxville. And so when I came back here, I knew that we didn't have a booming yoga community like I was used to in Knoxville. None of my teacher friends had problems finding jobs,
Yeah, of course.
Here I knew it wouldn't be as soft of a landing, but I knew I wanted to stay integrated in the wellness community. And so when I saw the Midland Wellbeing certificate training opportunity come up, I knew that I had to go for it. And it was through that training where I met all the people that kind of have changed my life and have made this dream of mine come true.
And that's what just makes us so great as we talk about these institutions like the Midland Area Wellbeing Coalition and just a creative idea of, how do we continue to move health forward in our community in different ways and in innovative ways. And I think what Kathy Snyder and her team has built over there has just been amazing. And there's been so many other people along the way too. I don't want to miss anyone and just call Kathy specifically by name, but continuing to carry that program in such amazing ways. And that's what creates change, places for people to find that belonging and come together with that common interest.
Absolutely. When I reached out to Kathy Snyder about the training, and I kind of told her my story and, that I was a yoga teacher and I was going through this SEL and mindfulness yoga teacher training. And I kind of just let her know I felt like I had a lot to offer the community. And she agreed. And I am so grateful to her for really just letting me be connected the way that I am to all the wellness leaders of the community. It's been great.
Super awesome. And it was funny. We were just walked through Live Oak over to get here and saw Kathy meeting with
did
someone
too.
over there. And I didn't get a chance to say hi, but it's
Yeah.
just that type of presence in the community and just being available and willing to make those connections and conversations. And we need those kind of people in order to keep moving work along. And so happy to have you as one of those people here in the community now as well. So what does your day-to-day look like now and where did you land at?
My day-to-day is all over the place, and I love it. I wouldn't have it any other way. So right now I am a Discover You coach for The Rock, and The Rock is a wonderful nonprofit organization here in Midland, and they directly serve youth, and so they go into the middle schools and the high schools, and they really just teach kids about important topics like hope and resilience and perseverance, and just helping them to learn all the life skills they'll need once they leave their schools and go out into the community themselves. And so as a coach, I go into classrooms and I teach these important topics like character strengths and growth mindset and communication. And so on Mondays, I'm at one school, and on Tuesdays, I'm at another, and it's really exciting and fun.
It's like even myself working at the community foundation, and we've granted to the Rock in the past, and stands for Raising Our Community Kids, correct?
Yes.
And it's been around for I mean, it has to be over 15 years at this point. Or
I believe it's 2001
oh wow,
that Beverly first started the Rock, and the first
iteration of it.
iteration of it, and from there it's just really evolved.
I remember going down in the basement of the community center, and it would be like kids kind of gathering and hanging out. And I had a couple friends that were involved in those after school programs, and they always just they were always talking about how great it was just to have kind of a place to go after school. And that is part of the point there for the after school portion of this, but you're doing much different work. And Discover You is really about supporting that, like we talked about, that interpersonal infrastructure of a community, and how are we, providing that place for people to be themselves and understand what role they play.
Yeah, when it comes to caring for your community, when we first moved here in 1994, it was really difficult for my family to really find somewhere for us to all be and exist as a family, because we were all so different from each other. And so our activities and all of the things that we were into kind of were taking us away from each other. So moving back here, there's so many more things that you can do as a family. You can go to the library and there's something for everyone. You can go to the Center for the Arts and there's something for everyone. Even if your family's totally different from each other. So I really love that about Midland, coming back here and knowing that there was something for everyone. And I didn't necessarily feel like that back in 1994.
Well, and it's so cool to have things so accessible, like the pedestrian plaza, removing the barriers for everyone to be able to utilize that roadway, no matter what your favorite form of transportation is, to get down there and then be able to share that space there in downtown is just an awesome place to gather. The library, that library card is gold here in Midland.
Yeah.
I mean, the Grace A. Dow Memorial Library is just an amazing facility.
It's
and
more than a library, that's for sure.
Really is. It's a place for people to connect. It is some people's favorite third place. It is some people's getaway, some people's daily activity. It is just so important for not only some of our youngest residents, but all the way up to some of our oldest residents. And it's just got something for a little bit of everyone. And it's cool to hear that your family still interacts with that space and just has like a real home in that area. So we talked a little bit about you being in different schools. And let's get into the work a little bit more, and let's take a look at what type of topics you're really focusing on when you're speaking with students.
Sure. Well, the entire program goes through so many different topics, and the topics are slightly different from junior high to high school. But with the high schoolers, we talk about slightly more complex topics like healthy relationships and communication, self-worth, self-esteem, things like that. Just really important character strengths like perseverance and grit.
And I love that you said that you feel like you can really kind of walk alongside these students because you're so in the work with them directly.
Absolutely. Through my yoga teacher training and through my SEL, mindfulness and trauma-informed trainings, it has really kind of brought me closer to those parts of myself that have needed to be healed. And through that kind of work, I feel like I can really relate to the kids that much more, because as I'm going through the healing work, everything just feels fresh. And so as I grow, I can watch them grow too. And as I teach these topics, I'm relearning the topics. It's just been a really positive experience.
And we spoke about that SEL, that's social emotional learning, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. And I know that, so what school districts are you working in? I know that you work in a variety of spaces.
Yes. Well, the Rock is all over the place. But I personally am at Bay Aranac ISD Career Center and at Wendover High School.
Awesome. And we talked a lot about Wendover High School, and I think Wendover just has such an innovative approach to reaching some of our youth here in the community. That partnership with Phoenix Community Farm is so beautiful to have that on site and can kind of give folks a window into what it's like to work in that space. But there's just so much more going on there. So how do you measure success when you are working with students?
Well, just seeing them engaging more and seeing them really wanting to be involved in the community and, giving them the voices that they have. I mean, these are bright, energetic, intelligent, creative kids that have just as much to teach me as I had to teach
Absolutely.
them.
And all of
so-
us as community members.
Yeah. So in terms of measuring growth and things like that, I would just say just letting them go and watching how far they can go on their own. And to see that I can give out some tasks and responsibilities and they just go with it. It's amazing. I'm so impressed with these kids. I really am.
And they're young adults, so it reflects, like their interactions, I'm sure, reflect what's going on in society. Everything's one thing or another. It's Drake or Kendrick Lamar. It's this political party or this political party. Mm-hmm. It's this person or this person or this feeling or this feeling. How do you navigate that challenge of these differences, even within their own specific interactions?
Well, we do have a very wonderful chapter in our program about empathy. And so I really just encourage our young adults to approach their lives with curiosity, just get out and see the world, read those books, read those magazines, and just kind of learn more about each other. Just come at it from a place of curiosity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're helping these students out in these specific places, but you have your own student at home.
I do.
11 years old, correct?
Yes.
Learning to play violin, what is that like?
It's been really exciting. Both my husband and I, we didn't study music in school, and we really wish that we had. And so to see her actually doing it and teaching us music is just really exciting. And, I truly believe that all children should learn music, that it's a benefit in so many other ways in their lives. But just to see her interest growing, and to see her joining, orchestra and to practice with another group of kids, it's really fun. And she's meeting people through it too.
That's awesome. So as she learns and as you two learn, am I sensing maybe a three-piece West violin troupe here?
Oh, we're always talking about the family band. Always. It's always on the table.
Hey, I know some people at River Days, so
Stay tuned.
We can talk about it. Yeah. The Wests are coming to River Days. So where is your daughter going to school then?
She is at Siebert.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And she'll be at Jefferson next year.
And that takes you to Dow High. That's a different track than you took.
Yes, just a little bit.
Did old habits die hard? Was it like, oh, I want her to be a chemist?
Yeah.
It'd be great schools either way. It's not a real thing, but
yeah, it was weird. I had to kind of grieve a little bit that she wasn't going to be a chemic because I love that school and they loved me back. But I love Dow High just as much. I wrote for the Focus at Midland High. And so Dow High, we were competitors. Our newspapers were competitors, but
they have a great newspaper over there too.
They do. But at competition at Michigan State, we were rooting each other on all the way. And I actually ended up working with Betsy Rao, who was the editor, or not the editor, but the advisor of their newspaper when I was in high school. And she was actually at Windover for a bit. And so I got to kind of hang out with her in a totally different capacity than we did before.
That's super cool. It's weird how, that's another boomerang effect, right?
Yes, totally full circle. It was really, really neat working with her.
And when you came back to Midland, I know Siebert's a big part of your journey too, about getting involved in the community, you personally. So not only was your daughter going to Siebert, but you really kind of found a home in plugging into that school too. So how did they help introduce you to this community a little bit more, or reintroduce you, I should say?
The journey has been a wild one, but it's so fun.
What a year and a half, really.
Yeah, I can't believe it's only been a year and a half, but it really just shows what happens when you come back to a community and they care, I think I had told you when we first moved back here, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with myself. And so I kind of threw myself into volunteering at my daughter's school because, she's 11 years old and I keep hearing rumors that she might not want me around for much longer. And so, I just...
Rumors from her?
No, from my girlfriends. They're like, yeah, 13 years old.
Oh, they're predicting the future.
Yeah. So I thought, I'm going to spend as much time with her at her school as I possibly can. And so I put every minute and hour I had into that school. And through that, they kind of gave me an idea to apply as a substitute paraprofessional in case they needed help in the media center specifically. And so I could sub if she was ever out or sick or something. And so I applied, I got the job, and I started subbing all through Midland Public Schools at the elementary schools. And where do I even go from there? Yeah, it's just from subbing, I was able to start this other yoga teacher training, which was only for educators. And from that, the well-being certificate happened. And then at the training, I met Beverly Wenzel. It's just been like a whirlwind.
What a journey.
Yes.
Absolutely amazing. And now you're continuing to make the difference in young people's lives, a difference in your own life.
Yeah.
And, and your family's here, and you are a functioning part of this community. And it's so beautiful to have you back. And these are the stories that we want to continue to uplift in Midland. And I just think it's great to hear from somebody who was here, had a specific experience, but is now having a very, very different experience. And all those mirror effects, you and your dad deciding to move here at different times, but then also like your gifts of like moving out due to writing, but then coming back due to other things, and that difference of making that impact on young people's lives here.
Yeah, I would consider myself a true Midland success story.
I would agree.
Yeah, when we decided to move back here, I was just excited to be near my family again. But I kind of had it in my head that I might have to fight my way back. I'm like, are they going to accept everything I have to bring? Like, how does Midland feel about social, emotional learning and mindfulness and things like that? But instead of a fight, I found just an embrace. Midland was ready for what I had to bring, and from that very first Max Loves Midland navigation meeting I went to, I knew I was home again. I could tell that you guys are here for the change that I'm looking for, and I'm going to be part of that change.
That's beautiful. And I know we have dreams moving forward too, and I hope you don't mind if we talk a little bit about some ideas that we have moving forward.
Sure.
And I know that you've spoken to me a little bit about an idea behind a friendship fair.
Yes.
So what would your vision behind that be? And nobody can knock it off. If you want to be a part of it, get a hold of us.
Yeah, this is our
proprietary
our
information.
Yes. Yeah. This was born from when we first moved here. My daughter, she was kind of struggling to find her place in her school. It was hard for her to make friends. 4th grade is kind of a difficult time to move. I know, because I had to do it too. And so I just really wanted to find a way to help her make some friends. And so through a conversation with her, what would you like to see where you can meet people? And so the friendship fair, or whatever we're going to call it, was kind of born from that. But we want it to be kind of like a networking event for kids. And so whatever interests you, if you're a Lego kid or, a video game kid, a football kid, we want to know what your interests are. So bring your interest to the friendship fair, and then we will kind of match you up with another group of kids that share the same interests, and hopefully lifelong relationships can be made from that.
That's awesome. So if anybody's out there watching and they would like to help get involved in this or kind of work alongside of you to maybe bring this forward, go ahead and email Max Loves Midland. We'll connect you with Tonia. And I think it would just be great to get this off the ground, because we know that connecting people to one another makes a huge difference. And we've seen success stories even here on the show with connecting people. And, now we have some economic development going on with a business opening. But beyond that, we receive emails sometimes with people saying that they've really been able to find their space here in Midland again, or just period, due to the Max Loves Midland community calendar, and just those simple connections of people being together that we anticipated when we launched the show, but they never feel like the gratification never goes away of understanding that people are finding their home here. And I hope that you're going to be able to continue to give that gift, and we can bring this to fruition at some point. So really appreciate you thinking innovatively and thinking about bringing people together.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. I'm so glad to be here.
And speaking of bringing people together, you and I, we're both writers in specific capacities. I was never really journalism forward, but when I got to college, I did pursue my creative writing certificate, and I did a lot of screenwriting due to my film classes. So we talked a little bit about what we could do a little countdown on today, or our draft picks, and we decided on writers, and I went all over the board on this. Like, I've got bloggers on here, I've got book writers, I've got, even got a local writer here. So I know you've got your notes here. So I don't think we're going to overlap too much. But what was your approach going into this draft?
Okay, so I overthought this like you would not believe. So
I just texted you. I dropped a bomb. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to shake it up.
So admittedly, I don't really get much time for reading anymore, for reading for pleasure. Right now, a lot of my books are about classroom management and trauma-informed teaching and things like that. You kind of made me miss my books a little bit with that question. So I came up with authors that I really enjoyed when I did have time to read for pleasure back in college. Okay. These are books I stole from my dad, basically.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm going to let you go ahead and launch for me here. Let's hear your first one.
My first one, I'm going to go Stephen King.
Oh my gosh. You are not getting... No, I don't have Stephen King in my life.
Stop it.
What's your favorite Stephen King book?
Oh, man. Eye of the Dragon.
Okay.
It's not a lot of people have heard of this one. It's actually a fantasy novel that he wrote for his daughter.
Interesting.
It's very not Stephen King-ish.
Is there a film adaptation of this one?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But it's incredible.
It was interesting, especially in that time period in the 90s, not to date anything here. But as those books were crossing over into film, that was the hot name in terms of author at that point in time.
Yeah, but every time I would hear about a film adaptation of a Stephen King book, I felt dread because I knew it wouldn't do it any justice.
So my first pick is going to be somebody I've talked a lot about on the show, and a lot of what we're doing here at Max Loves Midland is based on the principles of this particular author. It's Peter Kageyama, and you have 3 books right behind your head at all times, so they're always right back here. For the Love of Cities, Love Where You Live. It's really based on the concepts of that emotional bonds between people in place, and that question of, how do you measure love in a community, and how do you bring it together? So anyone out there who wants to know a little bit more about what this show is based on, go read some Peter Kageyama books.
Also, I will definitely check that out.
Yeah. Number 2 for you.
My second pick was Douglas Adams.
Okay.
Because can't talk about authors without bringing up Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy is iconic.
Yeah, I mean, everyone should read it. It should be a textbook.
I think it was required when I was in school. I'm not sure if it's still a requirement out there, but I think I had it required in an English class in high school. So
I don't think it was required for me.
It was a good one. My next one's going to be more of an internet blogger and writer that I think really changed the way sports have been talked about. So I don't know if you'll be familiar with Bill Simmons. Bill Simmons, he's the head of the Ringer Network at this point in time, but I just love Bill's old think pieces on sports, and he just overthinks everything and analyzes it in ways that I find to be extremely entertaining. And just to see the way media has changed and really crossed over from writing into podcasting, and a lot of what we're doing here now is taking your story, which is a written story, and then applying it to this podcast idea. And I think there's a lot of that mixed in through some of that early writing. So I went with Bill Simmons.
That his name does sound familiar. I will say, back when I was a journalism major, I looked up to so many other journalists. I would love to have the confidence of this journalist. But then after I switched careers and went into graphic design, I kind of just let all that knowledge go.
Just let it slide a little bit.
Just let it go.
What do you have for number 3 for me?
Number 3, I have an author named Christopher Moore.
Ooh, okay.
He is very quirky, very interesting, very hilarious. And I honestly don't know how to explain his type of books, but they are just a wild ride, and I would suggest to anyone to check them out.
Awesome. So my next one, I went with Mitch Albom, who worked for... he was a writer in Detroit, so did a lot of columns, but also wrote books as well. And he'll a lot of times be called in as an expert on documentaries about, the Bad Boy Pistons, or he's just kind of a voice in so many different categories. So I just like the flexibility of kind of being able to move and shake in different spaces with competence.
Yeah.
So that's always the goal. So
I'm pretty sure I wrote a letter to Mitch Albom in high school for a journalism project.
That's super cool. Yeah. And he's been known to reach back out. Did you
he wrote back.
He wrote back?
He wrote back.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So
I think that's part of the reason why I chose him is because we all know Mitch writes back.
Yeah, there you go. That's amazing. Yeah, and that's always been kind of the thing is Mitch will write students specifically. So super awesome. So what do you have for number 4 for me here?
Number 4, I have Tom Robbins.
Okay.
He wrote this book, one of my very, very, very favorite books called Jitterbug Perfume. Another wild ride. He actually kind of his writing reminds me of Christopher Moore a little bit, but just the imagination on this guy, I could not imagine how he came up with this stuff. But the story's great, and maybe there is a movie, a Jitterbug Perfume movie.
That feels familiar to me. I'm not positive though, so
Yeah,
we'll have to look into it.
Such a cool story.
We'll get our fact checkers to take a look, and we'll put it in the show notes.
Fact checkers, please.
My next one is going to be an author named Mark Manson. He's more of a current author, and he writes about this idea of the little things in life not getting you down. So his big project, I can't say it here because it's a family show, but it's called like The Secret Art of Not Giving a, and you can fill in that last word if you want.
Oh, maybe I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's like a pretty large book, and then he's got another book that's starts with that particular word, and it's called a book about hope. And so it's just really funny,
right up
and
my
it's
alley.
kind of like inspirational in a way of, it's a little bit nihilist at times, but it's that idea of you have to kind of move on, and there's virtue in understanding you can get past things, and it's a really, really interesting take on writing.
Oh,
so.
I love that. Yeah, I'll have to check them out.
Absolutely. All right. Here we go. Number 5, final.
All right. So I had to go with Kurt Vonnegut for my number 5.
Okay.
Because his books just really changed the way that I think. Just, again, another great imagination, but just his books really stay with me. And they really just kind of just get my gears moving. And it just helps me look at the world a little bit differently. And I appreciate any book that does that for me.
That's awesome. So this next one is going to be a local storyteller in different avenues, similar to what we're doing here on Max Loves Midland. But somebody I worked alongside to do a 50 Stories for 50 Years series for the Community Foundation a couple years ago, but really someone who kind of laid the blueprint for what we're doing here. And that's Phil Ike. I think Phil has been just an inspiration in our region for storytelling. I met with him actually this morning and just had another coffee with him to talk a little bit about, this vision of always keeping your heart at the core of your work and just that emotional drive to make that difference. And I think what Phil's been able to do with his people portraits, and then also taking his business to a nationwide identity of, writing stories in communities and just being a real place and person-based storyteller that connects to the heart of what we're doing. It's somebody I look up to, somebody local, and somebody who's doing a lot of the similar work that we're doing here at Max Loves Midland, and really helped kind of lay the blueprint for a lot of what we're doing here. So I wanted to give some flowers to somebody local. So
yeah, I actually met Phil very briefly at a Max Loves Midland navigation team meeting.
It was, I think, like first or second quarter last year he came.
Yeah. Not too long ago. What an interesting guy. He has so many cool things to say, and I actually have been following him on Facebook too. And
he's a great storyteller there as well. Like the social
storyteller.
media writing is phenomenal.
Yeah, and he really understands how important storytelling is in terms of bringing a community together. Just it's through our stories where we find commonalities and where we can find new ways to help each other and support each other and love each other. And, conversely, having curiosity when listening to these stories, it really helps our community bloom. It really does.
I agree. And thank you so much for being a part of this draft and also on the show today. But we talk about community blooming, and our community is going to continue to bloom. And now it's time for the tough question. And it's the one we ask everyone on the show. And, you look forward at the future of Midland, and what are some of your goals, some of your hopes and dreams for this community?
That is a big question. And it's a tough question because, for me personally, it's already happening. The Midland that I wanted back in 1994 is here. It's arrived. But from here, we can just, make it that much more comfortable, make all of our services that much more accessible, and continue to be a community of curiosity and storytelling and support and outreach. It's, that's all I could really hope for.
That's awesome. And we are so happy to have you, your husband, Aaron, your daughter here in this community. And it's just a blessing to have you here, Tonia. So
thank you. It's so great to be back.
I am going to surprise you with one more question, because this has been, a story about that boomerang effect and that looking in the mirror. So if you can go back to 1994 and talk to Tonia, what's some advice that you would give her moving to Midland?
For moving to Midland specifically?
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to make that place for yourself. Instead of being a teenager that was kind of afraid of how people would react to me, I wish I would have just put myself out there and stayed authentic, instead of having to take that long walk back to myself and feeling proud to be in the skin and where I am in life today. I would have just told her, just don't walk so far away from your authentic self. Just, you're good where you are.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. We really appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Absolutely. I appreciate the sweater as well, because usually I try and match the vibe of whoever I'm going to be interviewing in terms of, what I have in my closet. Not to fully remove like my own personal style, but I don't know why I was feeling sweater this morning, and I was kind of rushing around too. I was like, I had this meeting, another meeting, place to go, and I'm glad we got on page with the sweater. But your red sweater matching the glasses.
Yeah.
It's perfect for the intro.
I'm so sad I have to leave them here. I'll have to find my own pair.
I know. So hey, they were really hard to find. I think they were on Amazon. Just search heart-shaped glasses.
Okay. They're mine.
So there you go. Well, thank you so much, and we really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us today on the Max Loves Midland Show. I mean, we've had thousands of views on these videos and these stories now, and we just think it's so important to continue building those emotional bonds in the community. So as always, if you guys can continue to interact with that calendar, share out resources, and just champion Max Loves Midland in your circles for a place that is going to continue to do the boots on the ground work of connecting people to this place. And so until next time, like we always say at the end of the show, if you build a bridge and it doesn't work, build a tridge. Subscribe wherever you consume media. Max Loves Midland is your entertainment, resources, and collective improvement hub for Midland County. Plan your next adventure in Midland at maxlovesmidland.com.